My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be John and Lewis Carroll, Video 11, The Gnats new story. That's G-N-A-T, Gnat, okay, a character in the original Alice book. The Gnats new story, Part 1, the story that he wants John to take to Lewis Carroll, hoping to get that story into the next Alice book, should there be one. So here's my book, Lewis Carroll, Wonderfall. Here's John in his backyard. A door opens up in the grass where there'd never been a door before, and a whole bunch of little heads peek out from the darkness. As John the writer sits beside his pond, polishing a chapter of his new book, a door opens up in the grass, and the characters from Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass peer up at him from the darkness. John tumbles down through a hole in the ground to Wonderland, where the characters are busy rehearsing scenes for a third Alice book, which they hope John will persuade their author to write. But what if their author, Lewis Carroll, has other ideas? Now, this is the book that I've drawn the characters from, the annotated Alice. This is a book with both books in it, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, the two original books written by Lewis Carroll. So I've drawn the characters from them, but the point of my book is the characters are tired of the stories that they are involved in that book, and they want new stories, and they want John to help them out. So, excuse me. In the two outer story chapters of this novella, John and Lewis Carroll Wonderfall, chapters 1 and 10, that's first and last chapters, John's sitting in his backyard. In the inner story, from chapters 2 to 9, John interacts with Lewis Carroll and the Wonderland characters. While all of the inner story chapters, have a story which is told to John by one of the Alice characters, John also interacts in every other inner chapter with two other characters. In 4 of the chapters of the inner story, John interacts with Lewis Carroll. And in 4 of the alternating chapters, he interacts with the Gnat, G-N-A-T. So let's look at the first chapter, chapter 4, in which John interacts with the Gnat, a character from the original Alice books. Let's go to page 21. He interacts 4 times in this first chapter with the Gnat. So the premise of the book is each of these characters, these Wonderland characters, takes John aside and tells him a story that he or she would like Lewis Carroll to make into the next Alice book. So here's the Gnat. The Gnat manages to speak to me quite frequently. Perhaps he sees himself as a spokesman for the group. After each character takes me aside, each in a secretive sort of way, the Gnat always seems to place himself in my path. I wonder what story he will have to tell. Stories of flood and fire and danger, armies of gnats battling for dominance as miniature kingdoms rise and fall, gnat loves and gnat hates and raging gnat desires. Are there stories of epic proportion in the gnat world? Well, that's the first section. Let's go to the second section, in which John interacts with the gnat. I know you're not familiar with my story, John, the gnat is telling me. You're probably struggling to remember the role I had in the Alice books. I don't fancy myself a major character, John. I'm not vying for the biggest, most dramatic role. I'm not like all the other Alice characters competing for your attention. I don't even care to put a bug in your ear. So that's the second section. Here's the third. I can't see what the gnat is driving at. Why doesn't he tell me a tale? I'm not like all the others, John. Not like one of them at all. If anything, I'd say I'm more like you. You're a writer, John, a writer. Now, what are the writerly traits? What makes you and our authors so different from those who are telling such grandiose tales? Why can none of them take up a pen and make a book? Well, they only see the small picture, John. You writers can see the whole scene. You stand back and take in the whole of the enterprise. You and I are very similar, John, much more similar than you would think. Being so small, I listen and learn, John. It's like living inside a watch. I see myself as more of an idea man, a thinker, a concept guy. A novel is like a watch, John. Has this comparison occurred to you? Gears intermeshing with gears to propel the story machine? I expect to become an author one of these days. So the Gnat says he's different from the others, and he seems to be. Here's the fourth section of this first chapter where John interacts with the Gnat. The Gnat is becoming a pest, though I can't put my finger on why. I'd be interested in talking more often, John. Perhaps you have something that I can learn. A working author, a writer of books, a teller of tales, the veteran tutoring the novice, that sort of thing. Perhaps you'll tell me some of your secrets, give me a glimpse of writerly lore, tell me something that only an author could possibly know. In return, John, I'll share what I have observed with you. So there's a kind of a promise from the Gnat, though it's hard to tell what he means by it. I've studied serious literature for 60 years. I've been writing serious literature for over 25 years. What I've come to see as one of the common elements of all serious literature is agendas. It strikes me that every character in a serious piece of literature has an agenda. And since every character in a serious piece of literature is a member of a society, each character either desires to interact with or is forced to interact with other characters. So the question of each serious piece of literature for the reader is as to what kind of agenda each of the characters will pursue. In the beginning of the inner story of this novella, John and Lewis Carroll, wonderful, which runs from chapter 2 to chapter 9, John's given to understand that all of the characters who greet him when the door opens in his backyard share a common agenda. As the story moves on into chapter 3, however, turns out that each of the characters whom John speaks seems to have a personal agenda. So the question in John's mind, and the question in the minds of the readers, is as to whether these individual personal agendas will result in a group shared agenda. In other words, can each of these stories that the individual Alice characters hope will be written by Lewis Carroll be included in the same book? In addition, John interacts with the writer Lewis Carroll. So a further question in John's mind is as to whether the personal agenda of Lewis Carroll, the story that he wishes to write, will act in concert with the stories of the other characters. The overall question then is whether any of the personal agendas should be seen as opposed agendas, agendas which favor one character over another character, or whether any of these agendas should be seen as exclusive agendas, which can be included in a third Alice book only if the other stories are not included. I suppose the simplest way to summarize this topic is to say that there are two kinds of agendas in any serious piece of literature, as there are in any interaction among people in everyday life. Number one, there are shared agendas, and number two, there are opposed agendas. One can only wonder whether the Gnat is aware of the possibility of an agenda conflict as he prepares John for whatever will turn out to be his own personal request. So in that chapter, the Gnat doesn't tell John a story, doesn't ask John to take his story to Lewis Carroll. So what is he up to? And is he aware that he might be in concert with the other characters, or he might be opposed to the other characters? So here again is my book, John and Lewis Carroll, wonderful. It's available on Amazon, where you can get more information. It's available on my publisher's website, roxmillspress.com, where there's more information. On my website, johnpassville.ca, there's 2 free books, a planning notebook and a reflective journal, where I write about all the things a writer thinks about as he's planning, writing, and polishing a book. So have a look at that. if at either of those two books, if you'd like to read about it, and they're free, they're on my website at johnpassel.ca. Lastly, I'll say thank you for watching this video.